Season 2 is out for World of Tanks Blitz, and in today's video, I'll be reviewing each of these three vehicles. We have the Basilisk, which is the Tier 7 T20 knockoff, the Nebulon, a Tier 8 TVP VTU knockoff, and the Glacier, which is a Centurion 7-1 knockoff. I'll be explaining why these are all literally just worse versions of the tech trees that exist. Now, this is actually quite contrasting to the first season of vehicles we had released, which was the Magnate, the Fixer, and Regressor. The Magnate is literally just an amazing Tier 7. It's a better version of the Indian Panzer, and it's a lower tier. It's just a fantastic vehicle. The Tier 8 Fixer is also just a better version with more hull armor and a much higher alpha gun than the Super Pershing. And then the Regressor, while not better in every stat than the Tech Tree 50 TP, is much more mobile and features combat stabilization, making it quite accurate on the move, also featuring about 20 millimeters more pen. So all of the vehicles in Season 1 were strong, and I actually ended up liking each one differently. In fact, on my free-to-play account, I have not only the Fixer, but the Magnate. I did get the Regressor, but unfortunately I couldn't get any of the modules on it. While these Season 1 tanks are very good, I can't say the same for Season 2. Now, while I have not purchased the vehicles, I do have the statistics available, which we're going to be going over in today's video. So let's get straight into it. Let's start off with the Basilisk. This is the Tier 7 Collector, and obviously it is based off of the T20, which we coincidentally have lined up against it on Blitz Stars. Let's take a look at the gun, mobility, and armor to see just which one of these tanks looks better. So, starting off, we have the DPM. Slightly better for the Basilisk, about 3% more. Not something that'll be hugely noticeable, but it is still a difference nonetheless. But penetration is quite a bit worse. It's 6 millimeters less on the standard, and it's even more of a difference of 10% on the premium, going from 218 on the Basilisk to 243 on the T20. And don't get me wrong, like 218 is still going to be enough to get through the majority of situations, but 243 is insanely good, and it's weird to see a collector variant have actually less pen than the tech tree. It's actually really weird, so that's quite disappointing. If we take a look at the aiming time, the T20 is better. If we take a look at the dispersion, the T20 is better. If we take a look at the on-movement dispersion, so when you're turning your turret, the gun is going to stay aimed in more on the T20, and the T20 has 1 more degree of gun depression. So far what we've seen is that essentially the gun on the T20 is flat better than the Basilisk. Okay, how about we take a look at mobility? Well, yeah, the T20 has a higher top speed, it's got a better power to weight, its effective power to weight is better, so once again, the T20 is just flat better in mobility. Okay, well how about armor? Is the T20 any better there or worse? Well, we can see that the frontal armor of the turret is 120 on the Basilisk, and it's 110 on the T20. Yeah, don't worry though, the hull armor is 1 millimeter more. Woo! We can actually take a look at the armor of these vehicles. This is the Basilisk, being aimed in by the T20 with 160 mils of pen. We can see the entire frontal hull is useless. It doesn't matter how much you angle it. I mean, sure, you got some weird little angles, but it's still going to be very easy pen. Anybody's just going to butter right through that frontal plate. And don't get me wrong, the turret armor, it's a little troll. I mean, there's certain edges where it's upwards of like 190, but if you just shoot right next to the gun, you're guaranteed going to pen every time. It's about 130 to 140. So it's not like this is a hard penetration. Any rounds are going to cut through you. And if you just load premium, yeah, I mean, the vehicle basically has no armor. Obviously, the sides and the rear of the tank are also pretty useless on armor. So let's compare that to the T20, because obviously you'd expect the T20 to have worse armor, and I mean, it really doesn't. I mean, we can compare them here. The spots that are red on the Basilisk are also pretty close to red on the T20 due to auto ricochet angles. The roof of the vehicle is actually an auto ricochet as well. So because of that, when using gun depression, the T20 is also equally hard to pen, with the gun mantlet being the same thickness, and with the cheeks also being impervious. You're going to have to load premium to have a chance to cut through them, just like we saw with this tank. So, honestly, I don't see any differences between these vehicles. And because of that, the gun is just flat better on the T20. I cannot say that the Tier 7 is anything special. Sure, it might earn you some credits, but apart from that, it's just worse than the tech tree, at least on paper. So, that's a bit disappointing. Now we move on to the Tier 8, which is the TVP VTU knockoff. The Nebulon. It's got like little spinny claws on the front, which is really cool. The only problem is that they're not actually going to do anything. It would have been awesome if you like ram somebody and you would do like a little bit of passive damage, maybe like 10 damage every second you kept face hugging them or something like that. I don't know. Unfortunately, that doesn't actually do anything, so they're just a useless addition to the vehicle's overall cosmetic. Apart from that, the tank's just a TVP VTU, as we can clearly see. And taking a look at the statistics, you're going to see it's a worse TVP VTU. First of all, we have the DPM, which is slightly more. It seems like Wargaming with the whole lot of these vehicles has given them slightly better DPM, at the downside of worse everything else. Like penetration, this vehicle features worse standard pen and about 20 millimeters of worse premium pen, and it gets also worse because the vehicle has less alpha damage by about 30. Now, having less alpha damage could be better in certain situations where you need that second of better reload to shoot somebody. But for the majority of situations, I'd much rather have the higher alpha to bonk people harder, especially because, this is the sad part, the TVP V2 has better aiming time and much better dispersion. So the vehicle has more alpha and it's more accurate with more penetration. I don't even get it. Like, why would you ever want the Nebulon? It doesn't make sense. Now, there is one big advantage for the vehicle, and that is gun depression. The Nebulon is 9 degrees, the TVP V2 has 6. And that obviously will make a big impact in certain ridge lines you play the tank. It's one of the things I always find weird about the TVP V2. But again, the gun is just flat better, and I don't usually drive the TVP frontline, so I don't really feel like it's that much of a problem. And by the way, mobility, I mean the TVP smokes it. It has a top speed of 60, it's got a power to weight much better, better traverse speed, and even armor-wise, it's way better on the turret. So again, it's some yin and some yang. It's really dependent on what you want, though. Like, the gun depression will be nice. Being able to work this tank hull down is cool. But at the same time, it's not like the vehicle has a lot of armor. At thickest, you're getting about 220 millimeters of turret armor. But behind those little bits of angled pieces, you also have very weak armor, which is only about 170 to 160. I mean, sure, the Nebulon has some weird spots that you might get the occasional bounce, like this little spot here, 256. But at the same time, you might just miss it by an inch and hit this for 160. So a vehicle that may not have penned you previously is now going to pen you because it hits a spot that it can. So I don't know, it's kind of weird. Compare that to the TVP V2U's armor of just a flat 216 millimeters, and once again, it really makes you question why you would use the Nebulon with weird armor when you can just have flat, solid armor. Even the upper plate on the TVP V2 of 170 is stronger than the Nebulon's 150. Again, there are some certain spots that are like 200, but again, the majority of this upper plate is only about 160, which makes it just flat weaker. So yeah, I mean, armor, they're comparable. I would say I still trust the TVP V2s more because of the fact that turret is actually really solid at certain angles, we can see. But yeah, the Nebulon's armor is also pretty troll. I mean, we can see where the gun mantlet is. It's got a lot of tricky spots. So it's definitely a pretty well-armored medium, and the gun depression will be nice. I will say that. Like, this is definitely an advantage over the TVP V2, but it's at the disadvantage of less pen, worse alpha, and worse accuracy. So, I don't know. Now we arrive to the Glacier, the Centurion 7-1 knockoff. Now this vehicle is a bit disappointing because it doesn't feature the Hesh firing gun that the Centurion 7-1 has. I mean, that's a really big disappointment. Now to be fair, the Glacier does have one cool thing going for it, and that is its mechanic being tracer shells. This will keep your opponent spotted for 20 seconds rather than the standard 10. Really, really cool. But at the same time, yeah, again, the vehicle doesn't get Hesh like the Centurion 7-1 on the tech tree. So already that's pretty disappointing. But I figured let's keep it fair and compare the Centurion 7-1 with heat to the Glacier with heat rounds as well. So let's start off with the standard levels of DPM. Once again, we can see that the Glacier has slightly more DPM, just like all the other vehicles, at a 5% difference. Okay, so not too much of a change there. But look at the pen difference. It is 268 millimeters on the Cent 7-1 to 247 on the Glacier. That is a massive pen difference of 10%. And by the way, the heat is just as bad. It's 308 heat pen on the Glacier versus 330 on the Centurion 7-1. Again, that is terrible levels of penetration for the Glacier. So even though you might have that DPM advantage, I could literally run Rammer on the Centurion, have now more DPM than the Glacier, And the Glacier will still only have about 8 millimeters more pen, while having still worse standard by about 10 millimeters. So, yeah, I'm going to be real. The pen is not good on the Glacier, and that's a really big disadvantage. We can also see that the shell velocity is quite a bit worse at 1200, so it's not only worse on the pen, but it's worse on the shell velocity. It's also worse on the on-movement dispersion, so while the aiming time is slightly better on the Glacier, the on-movement dispersion is basically going to even that out. So gun handling-wise, they're basically the same. Top speed, the Centurion 1 is faster. It can achieve 50, where the Glacier achieves 45. The Centurion 7-1 has a much better power to weight by literally 20%. So the vehicle is much faster, has a better power to weight, and wait until we break into the turret armor. A lot of you would probably think that the Glacier has really good armor, and I mean, it looks really good until you actually examine it. I mean, yeah, it's got a lot of red, but first of all, the upper plate's only about 220-ish millimeters thick, so not very strong. The lower plate's only about 120. The turret cheeks are only about 240, and sure, I mean, look at that big old strong mantlet. It's upwards of 300 to 296 millimeters thick, but so is the Centurion 7-1's. 400 millimeters thick. You will never, ever, ever cut through the Cent 7-1's mantlet. Now, sure, looks like the roof on the Cent 7-1 is easy to pen, but once you use gun depression, good luck penetrating that roof. And that's obviously, well, not the case for the Glacier. First of all, it's got a big ol' hatch, which a lot of people can hit. It looks pretty hard to hit, but it's actually not that hard. I've messed around with it. The Centurion 7-1 has no hatch whatsoever. I should also point out that the turret cheeks are just as large on the Glacier, where the Centurion 7-1s are actually quite hard to hit. So, yeah, I don't know. This vehicle's armor, it looks troll, but it really actually isn't. And here's the worst part. The roof of this vehicle is terrible. It is only 50 millimeters thick. Now, for any of you that are unaware with how 3 calibers rule works, the essential way that it makes sense is that any tank that has a caliber, so let's say your armor is 50 millimeters, but there's a 152 millimeter cannon shooting at you, you will overmatch that armor because it is 3 times the thickness plus 1. That's how 3 calibers rule works. I can showcase this very easily by pulling out, how about a T30. This has a 150 millimeter. Notice how no matter how much gun depression you use on the tank, the roof of the vehicle is always a pen. Well, that is because of 3 calibers rule. So essentially, anytime there's a TD aiming at your vehicle, don't even bother using it hull down, because you're always going to be overmatched on the roof. Again, compare that to a Centurion 7-1, and the Cent 7-1 is not going to be penned on the roof because of that fact that the roof is actually quite a bit stronger at 104. So if you want my honest opinion, yeah, the Glacier seems like it's a little bit different, but the pen is much worse, and the only real advantage you have is tracer shells. So I'm really not sure why Wargaming did this. I mean, the good news is it's not another overpowered premium to throw into the game. The bad news is there's not much special about the tank. But, oh well. I wouldn't recommend to buy them. I would just see how far you can get for free, and that's about all I can say. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my takes. What I will say is the Tier 8 is really the only one that I think is better than the tech tree. The other two I think are worse. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.